something so improbable, the impossible has happened.
5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, wow! In your life have you seen anything like that?
Hey TJ, what's going on? I'm Chandler, and this is Chandler With Sports. Welcome to a special edition of this all-crazy sports newscast.
Hey everybody, I'm Chandler With Sports, and this is the Sport Report.
Chandler With Sports is how he wants to go. With is his middle name, Sports his last name.
At the Sport Report, we pride ourselves on
neutral,
down the middle coverage
with an analytical spin.
We remove the bias so you can think about a team without any outside opinion.
No crazy points for attention.
No power rankings.
No opinions.
Just sports.
We're going to throw out the bias and throw in some facts. We're out to change the game. So without further ado,
here we go. Hit it, Blaze.
This is the Sport Report.
Welcome back to the Sport Report, everybody. I'm Chandler With Sports. We've been gone for a month. We've had a lot happen in the sports world. We're going to try and catch you up as much as we can. But first, we want to start with Bills safety Damar Hamlin and the situation that unfolded last Monday the 2nd. During a Week 17 game between the Bengals and the Bills in Cincinnati, Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest after a collision with Bengals receiver T. Higgins. He fell to the ground, got back up, and then dropped to the ground. And immediately, medical personnel came out and began to take care of him. They ended up doing CPR. They had to use a defibrillator. It was a scene that, even now, a week later, it still leaves you speechless watching it live. He's doing better. But yeah, it was just stunning, to say the least. So there is a lot of moving pieces to it, whether they should continue the game, whether they should stop the game. There's a man's life at stake. And like we said, he's doing better. But that was a stunning situation. It helped put a lot of things in perspective for sports fans and even non-sports fans who were catching up on the news, on their local news the next morning or across social media that night. Now, we don't have opinions on this podcast. We stay down the middle as best as we can. So consider this a public service announcement. To those of you who are utilizing this Damar Hamlin situation, we do not care about your opinions about whether the game should continue, Troy Vincent in the NFL. We do not care about your opinions about whether the game should continue. It's between two of the best teams in the AFC. We understand that. But your fantasy teams, your prop bets, the AFC playoff picture, it does not matter. There is a man's life at stake. And all you can focus on is yourself or trying to continue a game that doesn't matter anymore. Sickening. If you thought of that, you should be ashamed of yourself. Let this be a lesson to everyone. Wait for information. Be patient. You don't have to be first. You just need to be accurate. That's why we waited a week for this podcast to even be produced. We wanted to be on top of it. We were going to release an emergency podcast on the situation, but we had a team meeting. We basically came to the conclusion that we should wait. So we waited. We wanted to make sure that we had all the facts. We still don't even know if the NFL really did tell the ESPN broadcast that teams would be given 5 minutes to warm up. The NFL denies that it told players it had time to warm up, and head official Troy Vincent denies it to the extremes. But Monday Night Football broadcaster Joe Buck, who's one of the most accurate, most reliable journalists, broadcasters in the country and the world, Joe Buck and ESPN said they were told that there would be a warm-up period directly from the league office. The game would continue, and they were never corrected. And in this era of political correctness, you're going to be corrected the moment that you said something wrong. Joe Buck and ESPN said they were never corrected. So we'll let you decide what you want to think on that. That's the most relevant information we can give to you. It's verified and it's true. Speaking of ESPN, they handled this situation with class. Scott Van Pelt, Adam Schefter, Susie Colbert, Booger McFarland, Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, Lisa Salters, Ryan Clark. Kudos to y'all for handling everything with absolute class and professionalism on the spot for a situation that would probably never arise, never has, and may seldom ever again. Their demeanor and their tone, by not speculating about what happened and having an honest conversation, should be taught for generations in journalism programs. In the moment, without any major prep for something like this, it was phenomenal coverage. They help sum up what us as sports fans were feeling and what as humans were feeling. We're hurting. I mean, I was almost in tears trying to express what was going on to our team. I couldn't get words out to describe what was happening. To Bills head coach Sean McDermott, he's already one of the most respected people in sports. He told the referee, Sean Smith, hey, I should be at the hospital. I should not be coaching this game. I should be at the hospital with Damar. People are more important than sports, and we hope Damar Hamlin continues to recover. He was transferred from the hospital in Cincinnati to a hospital in Buffalo on Monday to continue his recovery a week after the injury occurred. So prayers up for him and his family at this really difficult time, and we're glad to hear that he's doing better. All right, now on to official business. Welcome back to the Sport Report. We are back, ready to roll. We got Colby Vollrath joining us for Around the NFL. We've also got some NBA, NHL, and college basketball news to open the show, and I believe a soccer update as well. So let's get rolling with college football.
And he scores on the last play of the game. Unbelievable. Touchdown Auburn. Touchdown Auburn. A miracle in Jordan Hare. He ran the missed field goal back. They're not going to keep him off the field tonight. Holy cow.
College football update. It's the most wonderful time of the year. That's right, it's the BCS College Bowl season.
College bowl season has been rolling on since we last spoke to you guys. 42 bowl games took place and a 43rd counting the national championship that concluded on Monday evening. We'll start on December 17th where the Louisville Cardinals defeat the Cincinnati Bearcats 24-7 in the Scott Satterfield Bowl. Satterfield is leaving Louisville for Cincinnati starting next season, so a big win for his former team against his new team. Number 14, Oregon State demolished Florida 30-3 in their Las Vegas Bowl on the same day. Florida keeps their scoring streak, not a scoreless streak, a scoring streak alive. They haven't been shut out in games, and they have not been shut out in a game since 1975. Fresno State defeats Washington State 29-6. BYU 24-23 winners over SMU, who decided to go for two late in the game. Boise State had a close one in North Texas, 35-32 over the Mean Green. Toledo comes from behind and takes down Hugh Freeze's former Liberty squad 21-19. Air Force, with their running game, stymied Baylor in the Armed Forces Bowl 30-15. Wake Forest 27-17 winners over Missouri. Duke stunned UCF 30-13. UCF was widely expected to dominate this game. Wisconsin 24-17 winners over Oklahoma State. In one of the most intriguing bowl games of the entire slate this postseason, Arkansas 55, Kansas 53 in triple overtime. There was a targeting call at the end of the second overtime. It knocked out a Kansas player. Arkansas led by over 20 points for most of the game. Kansas came back late in the game. It was not the only comeback attempt. We'll get to that in just a second, but Arkansas holds on for a 2-point win. 15th ranked Oregon edges unranked North Carolina 28-27. North Carolina tried to throw for a Hail Mary late in the game, could not convert. Texas Tech 42-25 winners over Ole Miss. Head coach Lane Kiffin was struggling to put words together in the aftermath of Mike Leach's death. Mike Leach, the former head coach of the Mississippi State Bulldogs as recently as this past season, died of a heart condition at the age of 61 at the beginning of the bowl season. So we'll touch on Mike Leach in just a minute as well. Minnesota 28-20 winners over Syracuse. Number 13 Florida State holds off Oklahoma 35-32. Washington is 12th ranked. They got a 27-20 win over 20th ranked Texas in the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. Notre Dame came from behind, 2 touchdowns down for most of the game against South Carolina. The 21st ranked Irish defeat the 19th ranked Gamecocks 45-38. 6th ranked Tennessee takes down 7th ranked Clemson 31-14 in the highest ranked Orange Bowl in history. Iowa shuts out Kentucky 21-0. Mississippi State, as we just mentioned, with playing without their former head coach Mike Leach, we're going to miss him dearly as well as everybody else in college football. 19-10 winners over Illinois in their bowl game. LSU obliterated Purdue 63-7, but it was not the biggest win in the bowls. We'll get to that in the national championship. 11th ranked Penn State 35-21 winners over 8th ranked Utah in the Rose Bowl. Cam Rising, the Utah quarterback, has said he will return for his senior season after falling in the past 2 Rose Bowls for the Utes. Now, speaking of a comeback, 16th ranked Tulane 46-45 winners over 10th ranked USC in the Cotton Bowl the day after New Year's. Tulane wins their first major bowl game since the 1934 Sugar Bowl when they beat Temple, who were coached by Pop Warner. Tulane comes back from 15 down with 4.5 minutes to play versus the 10th ranked Trojans. And their win probability, which we don't even agree with. Win probability is one of those things that's based upon previous results, but every game is a new game. We hope to touch on that more in the new year as we continue to do this podcast. But yeah, win probability was 99.5% for USC, meaning 99.5% of the time, they're going to win the game. And the other 0.5% of the time, well, it becomes reality. It just happened. Tulane 1-point winners over USC. In the college football national playoff, I guess you could say, the college football playoff national semifinals, third-ranked TCU 51-45 winners over second-ranked Michigan. The Horned Frogs advanced to their first title game since 1938. They ended up playing Georgia, who's the number one team in the country, after Georgia came from behind to beat Ohio State 42-41. Ohio State had a chance to win the game on New Year's Eve, and as the ball dropped in New York and the clock struck midnight, Ohio State 10 seconds later, missed a field goal. It just kind of happened to line up perfectly. Fans were not thrilled about that if you're an Ohio State fan. If you're a Georgia fan, you got to go to a championship game to take on the third-ranked Horned Frogs, who somehow survived Michigan. TCU led by 19 and double digits for most of the game. Michigan came back, but TCU just kept scoring. In the national championship game on Monday, this past Monday, Georgia, TCU, 1-3. And Georgia showed why they are in another class. TCU trailed 38-7 at half, the second largest halftime deficit in the national championship era since 1998. It's been 21 years since Miami annihilated Nebraska when they led 34-0 at half. 65-7 is the largest beatdown in the college football playoff era, the BCS era, any bowl game this season. That's the final score of the national championship, 65-7. Stetson Bennett, the Georgia quarterback, is now back-to-back national champion, fourth quarterback to accomplish that in the last 30 years. He had 4 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns, tying LSU's Joe Burrow for the most touchdowns responsible for in a title game with 6. Burrow did it in 2019 versus Clemson. Georgia also outgained TCU 589 yards to 188 yards, an absolute clinic for the Bulldogs. And now you can make the argument that TCU didn't belong, but as we mentioned a moment ago, Georgia's in another class. So yes, Michigan destroyed Ohio State, who blew a double-digit lead and lost on a missed field goal to a Georgia team that led by 31 versus TCU at half. Still following? The point is, on any given night, any team can come in and drop the ball or come in and destroy the team on the other side. It's impossible to predict, and anyone who says they know for a fact what's going to happen is lying through their teeth. Michigan lost to a TCU team that kept scoring. TCU won the game. And something else to note, the average margin of victory was 22 points in the last 4 title games, since Clemson and Bama had a thriller in 2017 and Alabama came back at half versus Georgia in 2018. That included Bama changing their quarterback at half. The closest title game in the last 4 years, 33-18 Georgia over Alabama. To save the talk that Alabama would have kept this closer than TCU or Michigan or any other school. You don't know if any school would have kept it close because it didn't happen. The fact is, TCU made it to the title game. They earned their way there with their 13-1 record. Their only loss coming to Kansas State in the Big 12 title game. It's a national championship. These are kids who are experiencing the grandest stage of their careers. They're humans. They're bound to make mistakes. The other 3 quarterbacks to win back-to-back national championships for their schools, Tommy Frazier did it as the quarterback for the Nebraska Cornhuskers in the late 90s, 97 and 98. Huskers ended up winning another title in 2000 for 3 and 4 years. Matt Leinart was the USC quarterback when they demolished Oklahoma in 2004, and then the iconic Rose Bowl versus Texas in Keith Jackson's last game the following year. A.J. McCarron did it in 2011 and 2012 for Alabama, and now Stetson Bennett does it 10 years later. Credit to Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, the commentators for the national championship on Monday, for calling a fantastic game, not trashing one side, not gloating too much about the other. They were down the middle as best as they could, and they were as professional as they could be. Kudos to them from a broadcast standpoint. That covers college football. Let's catch you up on college basketball, the NBA, the NHL, and some soccer news from the U.S. men's national team that we missed while we were gone. And then we will get to around the NFL with Colby. Starting with college basketball, Chris Beard, who's the head coach at Texas. When we left you, he had just gotten arrested for felony assault for domestic violence. His fiancée has come out and said that she was the one who hit him. The university, nonetheless, is let the investigation play out, and they fired him. The district attorney is determining whether they will charge him. But regardless, he's been charged with a felony, and there was a clause in his contract that allows him to be fired if he were charged with one at any given point in time. So in a sense, Texas views it as destroying the university's reputation, tarnishing it, I guess is the better word for that. Meanwhile, 6th-ranked Texas compiled 5 straight wins before falling to Kansas State 116-103. That's in regulation. And no, that is not an NBA game. It smashes the previous Big 12 record of most points combined in regulation of a Big 12 conference game. The previous record was 119 points set on February 9th, 2002 when Texas beat Colorado 104-95. This one between K-State and Texas had 219 points. Also the most points an unranked team has scored over a top 10 opponent since Loyola Marymount lost to 10th-ranked LSU 122-114 in 1990. Kansas State also set the mark for most points ever scored by an unranked team and a road win over a top 10 team in the AP poll era since 1948-1949. So a lot happening in college basketball. As March Madness rolls around here in 8 weeks, we will continue to cover the sport. In other news and notes, in the NBA, there were a few things that happened. Luka Doncic becomes the first player in NBA history to have a 60-point, 20-rebound, 10-assist triple-double. Just mind-blowing, to say the least. Luka Doncic at 23 is already becoming one of the best players in NBA history. 60-20-10's never been done, like we said, but 50-20-10's happened. Wilt Chamberlain did it twice, and Elgin Baylor also had 20 rebounds and a 50-point triple-double back in the 60s. Also, while we were gone, the Mavericks had a win over the Knicks, one that they were not expected to pull out. They become the first team in 2 decades to pull out a victory after trailing by at least 9 points in the final 35 seconds. Some people are having Texas A&M March Madness flashbacks right now. Teams in that situation had been 0 and 13,884 in the last 20 years when trailing by 9 points in the last 35 seconds. Also in the NBA while we were gone, the Los Angeles Clippers came from behind to defeat the Detroit Pistons. They were down by 14 points with 3 minutes to go. In the play-by-play era since 1996-97, NBA teams were 2 and 12,873 entering that game when trailing by 14 or more points with 3 minutes remaining. The only wins were by the Hawks on March 17, 1997 against the Magic, and by the Kings on January 27, 2020 against the Timberwolves. The Clippers were 0 and 417 in total, by the way. Since that Sacramento victory, teams in that scenario had lost 1,467 games in a row when trailing by 14 or more points with 3 minutes remaining. Okay. Yeah, a lot of things happened while we were gone. LeBron James scored fewer than 10 points in a game. Whoa, let's sound some alarm bells. Yes. It'd been 16 years, 1,125 regular season games since he last scored fewer than 10 points, almost 16 years to the day. This happened on January 4th of 2023. The last time it happened was January 5th of 2007 when the Cavs won by 9 over the Milwaukee Bucks. It was James's 4th year in the NBA, and the Cavs actually ended up going on to the NBA Finals that year where they lost to the San Antonio Spurs. All right, that covers the NBA. Let's go to the NHL. The Boston Bruins came from behind to win their Winter Classic at Fenway Park, 2-1 over the Pittsburgh Penguins. They now lead the Toronto Maple Leafs by 11 points halfway through the NHL regular season in the Atlantic Division. In the Metro, the Hurricanes and the Devils are battling it out. Those two teams are separated by 4 points, with the Capitals and Rangers 5 points and 6 points behind the Hurricanes. In the Western Conference, in the Central Division, the Dallas Stars and the Winnipeg Jets are 1 point apart, 54-53. They've also got a few other teams that are chasing their tails. In the Pacific Division, the Vegas Golden Knights have 56 points. The LA Kings have 54 points, but have played 2 more games than their counterparts in the desert. The Seattle Kraken, the newest expansion team in the NHL, have 50 points on 39 points. So if they were to win their 3 games in hand they have on Vegas, they would be tied for the Pacific Division lead and also the Western Conference lead. An expansion team doing well after finishing last season. Keep an eye on that as we get to the latter stages of the NHL season. Both the NBA and the NHL will run until the middle of April. We will begin to cover that more extensively. We'll have David Miller transitioning from the NFL to the NBA starting in a couple of weeks. Now on to soccer. We'll have Carson Cooper on in a few weeks. We want to recap the World Cup a little bit because we left y'all before the World Cup final in middle of December. African teams won 9 games of the World Cup. Morocco made it to the semifinals, the first African nation and the third national team outside of South America and Europe to make the semifinals of the World Cup. The previous record was 4 wins for African teams at the World Cup, by the way. We also want to correct something that we said. We said that Brazil was the last number 1 team to make the semifinals. Turns out it was actually France. In this edition of the World Cup, Brazil did it in 98. We didn't realize that France was the number 1 team in the world at this World Cup, the defending World Cup champions. They ended up going to the World Cup final where they fell to Lionel Messi and company in Argentina. 3-3 after extra time. They lost 4-2 in a penalty shootout. Argentina finally get their 3rd World Cup after their triumphs in the 80s in 78 and 86 under Diego Maradona. Lionel Messi finally gets that World Cup and ends the debate as to who's the greatest of all time between him and Ronaldo. He's also probably the best of all time when comparing Pele, who died recently, and Diego Maradona, also from Argentina. So congrats to Lionel Messi. It's a huge weight off his shoulders. He'll continue his club career at PSG as the season continues. Something we want to mention about the U.S. men's national team, Gio Reyna did not put in a lot of effort during his training sessions before the World Cup, and he was benched by head coach Greg Berhalter. So Reyna's parents decided it'd be a great time to bring up something from Berhalter's past that had yet to be mentioned, which probably should have been in the past, but it wasn't. So his parents brought up an incident where Berhalter kicked his wife 30 years ago. Now, let me make this very clear. We do not condone his actions, Berhalter's actions. This was not the time to mention it, and here's why. It was 30 years ago. Yes, he did it, and he shouldn't have. He should not have done it at all. But he got forgiveness for it. He was 18. He was in college at North Carolina. He was dating his soon-to-be wife. They broke up. They reconciled. Now they've been married for almost 25 years. But the reason it was brought up out of nowhere is because Gio's mom, Danielle, is a former member of the U.S. women's national team and roommates with Berhalter's now wife. She reported the incident to U.S. men's national team director Ernie Stewart because she would like to take the pressure off of her son. That was seriously the reason. I didn't want any further unwarranted attacks on my son. Unwarranted? Gio acted like an entitled baby before the World Cup. He didn't help his team, he helped himself. And Berhalter made the right call to bench him. And you cannot control other people and their reaction to your son. It sucks that he's getting that reaction. He does not deserve it. But in the spotlight that he's in, with the family history that he has in the U.S. men's national team, or the U.S. women's national team for that matter, he's going to be in that spotlight, and it sucks. It really sucks, but he doesn't deserve any of that. But it doesn't mean you need to bring up something from 30 years ago to trash another guy and throw him under the bus. It makes no sense at all. Just absolutely a terrible day for the U.S. men's national team. Finally, before we get to the NFL, a note on Pele. He was one of the greatest footballers of his generation, if not ever. He passed away at the age of 82, just after the World Cup completed. He will be missed. He had a large funeral in Santos, his hometown in Brazil, one of the greatest icons in sports. He was battling cancer in a Sao Paulo hospital for almost a year. So he's in a better place. We pray for him and his family. Just sad news to hear that Pele gone at the age of 82. Something we also want to note, Michaela Schifrin has 82 wins, level with Lindsey Vonn for the most wins by a women's skier in history, or second most wins, I should say. It would break the American record. Both of them are from the USA. Schifrin is competing in Europe right now in Slovakia, if I'm not mistaken, where she will compete for win number 83 and potentially more. She's 6 years younger than Vonn when Vonn got the record. So good luck to Michaela Schifrin. We hope to see her continued success as one of the best skiers in the world as she goes for her 5th skiing World Cup title, which would break a tie with Vonn, who also has 4 at the moment. That covers soccer. Let's go to around the NFL.
Leon left!
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
How in the world? Oh my goodness.
Around the NFL.
The Cowboys choked hard. What's new? Bears owners are handing out ice cream, and the road to the Super Bowl in the AFC will probably run through a neutral site currently unknown. This is Around the NFL. Pleased to be joined by our Sport Report NFL correspondent Colby Vollrath. And Colby, an interesting Week 18 in the NFL with 16 games on tap and 14 teams that would end up qualifying for the playoffs by the end of the day. Where do you want to start?
Honestly, I think I want to start with the Bills playing their first full game in about 2 weeks. And honestly, it was magical to see. Opening kickoff, Nyheim Hines takes it all the way back over 100 yards for the touchdown on the opening kickoff against the Patriots. I don't know if you were watching that game. There was just something in that game, especially considering after everything that happened in the previous game with Damar Hamlin. It just seemed like something was going to happen.
Yeah, and the Bills win 35-23. You touched on it. Even Josh Allen alluded to it in his post-game press conference that, and I quote, "It's spiritual. I mean, it's bone-chilling. It's something special for Nyheim Hines to return a kickoff return touchdown, 96 yards to open the game." We touched on Damar Hamlin in the opening of the podcast this week, and that's just something, I mean, he even admitted, he's like, there is a God, and we would admit to that as well. There is a God. Sports are something special, and for the kickoff return to happen, and then he had another kickoff return later in the game, that's actually our trivia question for the week. Who's the last player to have two kickoff returns in a game in the NFL? Hint, it happened 13 years ago. We'll get to that answer next week. But for Damar Hamlin, we pray that he continues to do well. It sounds like he is. He's improving. The Bills win 35-23. They lock up the number 2 seed in the AFC. Bill Belichick has a losing season, 8-9 on the year. Now he says he'll return for his 24th NFL season next year, and hopefully the Patriots will be in a better position with Mac Jones and company, even though they lose a few defensive starters potentially to retirement. All right, from Buffalo, we go to, there's 15 other games on tap. Where do you want to go next?
Let's just go by division. Let's go to Jets-Dolphins.
Jets-Dolphins was a very intriguing game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was probably the highest scoring game of the week. Close?
Highest?
Oh, yeah, highest. Yeah. 11
Yeah.
to 6, pretty high scoring.
Definitely. It was 11-6. It's good to see the Marlins defeating the Mets.
Yes.
The Dolphins needed to win and the Patriots lose to get into the playoffs, and they do so. And in the process, they create a bad beat. The line was 3.5 for the Dolphins. And in the end, they get a safety at the end that makes it 11-6, and they cover.
As time expired.
I was like, oh, dear heavens. But no offense during this game, reminiscent of a Colts-Broncos, Niners-Broncos, really any Broncos game earlier in the season, prior to like 3 weeks ago. But the Dolphins are into the playoffs. They will actually take on the Bills in the wild card round. We'll get to the playoff matchups later in the segment. Continuing on in the NFL, we finished with the AFC East. Why don't we continue in the AFC South, where the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts went to battle. Texans 32, Colts 31. The Texans needed to lose the game to lock up the number 1 seed or the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and instead they threw mostly a 4th and 20 Hail Mary that ended up in Jordan Akins' hands, the tight end for the Texans, and they get the 2-point conversion. They win by a point. Jeff Saturday has not won a game since his first game in charge of the Colts, and the Texans just fired their head coach Lovie Smith after a season. So I guess his parting gift was, well, you know what? You're going to fire me. I know this anyways, even though publicly I'm going to say that you're not going to fire me. I'm going to go out and win the game, and you're not going to get the number 1 pick. So congrats to the Texans. They're the number 2 pick. And congrats to the Colts. They had 4 wins. Also in the AFC South, a division title game, the Jags and the Titans on Saturday night. Jaguars 20, Titans 16. The Jags are going to the playoffs for the first time since Blake Bortles led them to the AFC title game in 2017. So are things changing in Duval County? Possibly.
So there's a chance.
There's a little bit of a chance. So we applaud the Jags. What they were 4-8 at one point in the season. They finished 9-8. They become the 3rd team in NFL history to start a season 4-8 and make the playoffs.
They have just gone on a tear. And on the opposite end, I mean, you looked at that same point in the season, you think the Titans are a lock to lock up that seed. I mean, I'm pretty sure at the time don't have it in front of me. They were 3 games ahead of every other team in their division. They were healthy. And then, Ryan Tannehill goes down. The Titans start losing a ton of games.
They lost 7 in a row to finish the year.
7 in a row to finish the year. That's what losing a starting quarterback does to your team.
And it also speaks to the player development that they have in terms of depth. So there's definitely some things to work on for the Tennessee Titans. Now from the AFC South, we go to the AFC West, where the Kansas City Chiefs locked up the AFC's number 1 seed and potentially home field advantage. We'll get to that in a minute. The Chiefs defeat the Raiders 31-13. Patty Mahomes is now 16-0 on the road against division opponents in his career. So, well, you know what? A number 1 seed for the Chiefs again. And the Raiders are now sent to the offseason with a lot of questions whether Derek Carr will be their starting quarterback, and whether a lot of defensive players will stick around. So, very intriguing stuff for the Raiders and the Chiefs. To the AFC West again, Colby, how did the Broncos game end up?
Surprisingly in the Broncos' favor over the playoff-bound LA Chargers.
Yeah, the Chargers will be the 5 seed in the playoffs. The Broncos replaced the turf at Mile High this past week, and it might have made a difference. 31-28 winners over the Chargers, and the Broncos are out of the playoffs. The Chargers are the 5 seed. The Chargers will actually play the Jaguars in the AFC wildcard round. That'll be on Saturday night on NBC. All right, to the AFC North. I could see a little bit of a smile on your face.
Oh, my, yeah.
Pittsburgh Steelers 28, Cleveland Browns 14. The Browns fired their defensive coordinator Joe Woods after the game. The Steelers and Mike Tomlin's got a lovely project on his hands for the offseason in trying to develop their rookie quarterback Kenny Pickett. He also finishes 9-8. They won 4 games in a row. They also won 7 of their last 9. And can you guess how many seasons Mike Tomlin has had without a losing season to start his career?
I believe it is now 17.
It is now 17.
That is just unbelievable coaching. And Tomlin's still young as a coach. Is he even 50 yet?
No. Gosh, Tomlin, I want to say is like 45. No, he actually is 50 now. He turned 50 in March of last year. My bad. I didn't think he was 50.
Oh, wow.
We've grown up with watching Mike Tomlin.
Mike Tomlin started when he was 30, what was that, 17 years ago? 33 is when he got the Steelers job. And since then, he has not finished the season with a losing record. It's just unbelievable how good it is.
If you look at the previous 3 head coaches for the Steelers, Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher, they were all hired in their younger 30s. So I know there might be a formula for success there for the Steelers. They've had 3 head coaches in the last 50 years. It's like Packers quarterbacks in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
2. So we'll get to the Packers in just a minute. The other AFC North battle between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals, both of these teams will meet in the AFC wildcard round. The Bengals are the 3 seed. The Ravens will be the 6 seed. The Ravens are without Lamar Jackson. Colby will touch on that in just a second. The Bengals, they needed a Buffalo loss to become the 2 seed. Instead, they will be the 3 seed. They will host a game. There will be no coin toss needed to decide the home site matchup or for that matchup. Any word on Lamar Jackson with his PCL injury? Is he going to return anytime soon? Will he be available for the playoffs?
So there is significant hope that Lamar is going to be available for the playoffs. I would expect Lamar Jackson to be playing this week, Sunday night, against the Bengals in Cincinnati.
Well, that covers the AFC. In the AFC playoff picture, the Kansas City Chiefs are the 1 seed. The Buffalo Bills are the 2 seed. They'll take on the Miami Dolphins Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The 3 seed Cincinnati Bengals and the 6 seed Baltimore Ravens will go to battle on Sunday Night Football on NBC at 8:15 Eastern. And then the 4 and the 5 seeds, the Los Angeles Chargers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are hosting that game as the 4 seed. They will be playing on Saturday night, also on NBC. Now to the NFC. We will start in the NFC South, where there wasn't really much to cover, so we'll get through that really quick. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers fell to the Atlanta Falcons 30-17. Tom Brady played the first half. The Falcons ended up winning by 13 after Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask came into the game. And the New Orleans Saints lose on a last-second field goal to the Carolina Panthers 10-7. The Saints had the ball under 2 minutes. Carolina got the ball back, drove down the field, kicked a game-winning field goal from Eddie Pinheiro, 43 yards, if I'm not mistaken. And the Panthers will actually finish second in the division due to that win. New Orleans finishes third. Atlanta finishes in fourth in the NFC South. Neither of those teams will be making the playoffs. The Buccaneers will be the 4 seed. To the NFC North, where the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions did battle. Packers lost. Holy cow. The Packers lost 20-16. The Lions were eliminated from the playoff race before the game, about 40 minutes before kickoff. But they've only won 3 times in Lambeau since 1992, and they got win number 4.
Yeah, this is a great game to watch. This game deserved to be flexed to Sunday Night Football. Even though the Lions were eliminated beforehand, it was a great game. Division games are always competitive, and especially between the Lions and Packers. Week 18. I mean, for the playoffs, you can't get better than that. And pretty much everyone had their money on the Packers and the Lions coming through. Dan Campbell is just a great coach, and I don't know. You can't help but believe in the Lions after watching Hard Knocks, after seeing the way Campbell runs the locker room. It's just cool to see, and Lions fans, you guys have a lot to look forward to.
The Lions have their first winning season since 2016. They will not make the playoffs at 9-8, but nor will the Green Bay Packers, who finish 8-9 on the season. The Packers, they have a lot of questions to answer in the offseason, but of the 2 teams that went into Lambeau last night, the Lions are the happier squad, and Dan Campbell has his team moving in an upward direction. So credit to him and rejuvenating the fan base and the culture in the locker room. We'll see what Detroit does next season. Also in the NFC North, the Minnesota Vikings defeat the Chicago Bears 29-13. The Bears get the number 1 pick, and after the game, the owners of the team, the McCoskies, were handing out ice cream bars from a Yeti cooler, celebrating that they got their first number 1 pick since 1947. Colby, a trivia question for you. The last time that the Bears had the worst record in the NFL was 1970. Can you name the team that also shared the worst record that year?
1970. Was it the Minnesota Vikings?
It was not. I was a couple years earlier, before the Headless Horseman and all that. It was the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it took a coin flip in a New Orleans hotel to decide who gets the number 1 pick. Who did the Steelers take with that number 1 pick?
Oh, geez. Was it? Oh, geez. I'm blanking. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on Steelers right now.
Bradshaw.
It was Bradshaw?
It was Bradshaw.
I couldn't get Troy Polamalu out of my head. I'm like that.
I don't think any of us can get the Tasmanian Sun Devil out of our heads these days. We miss him on the gridiron.
Yeah, not with those Head and Shoulders commercials.
I know, right? To the NFC West, where the San Francisco 49ers lock up the 2 seed by virtue of the Eagles win, which we'll get to in a second. 49ers 38, Cardinals 13. J.J. Watt, the defensive end for the Cardinals, is retiring after this season. He had an emotional goodbye after the 2-minute warning. Everybody just kind of let it grandstand and let him walk off the field under his own, on his own, and we're really thrilled to see him moving on to the next chapter of his life, but at the same time, we're really sad because he's one of the best defensive players of our generation, nonetheless, in NFL history, at least in the last 50 years.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that the latter portion of his career was just muddied by injuries. But he is 3-time, I believe it was 3 in a row, Defensive Player of the Year, I believe, in the early 2010s. He was just unbelievable when he was healthy. And Chandler, when he was picked by the Houston Texans, he was booed. The pick was booed when he was picked. And then not only did he become one of the best players in NFL history, he became one of the best men in NFL history. Remember the massive hurricane that really took out Houston? He was one of the first people. I believe he won Walter Payton
Award, yeah.
Walter Payton Man of the Year award. He's not only a great player, but he's a great human.
I agree with that 100%. J.J. Watt definitely going to be missed on the gridiron. In the other NFC West battle, the Los Angeles Rams will not be going to the playoffs a year after their Super Bowl. They don't even know if their head coach Sean McVay is going to return next season with all the things going on in his personal life. We wish him nothing but the best. The Rams fall to the Seahawks 19-16 in overtime, and by virtue of the Lions' win over the Packers, the Seattle Seahawks, who became the #1 Detroit Lions fans last night, end up going to the playoffs. They will take on the San Francisco 49ers, their other divisional rival in the wild card round. 3 divisional matchups in the wild card round of the 6 matchups across the 2 conferences. That's going to be very, very interesting. Now to the NFC East, where the Dallas Cowboys literally choked 26-6. They lose to the Washington Commandskins. Washington Commandskins, they finish their season on a high note. They finish 8-1, so literally 500. The only team in the league to finish literally 500. They get a big 20-point win over a Cowboys team that decided it was January and it was time to choke. But nonetheless, the Cowboys are in as the 5 seed, so they'll take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the first round on Monday Night Football at 8:15 Eastern on ESPN. So, we forgot the Giants for a moment. The Giants fell 22-16 to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles will be the #1 seed in the NFC. They will get the first round bye like the Kansas City Chiefs, but the difference is in the NFC, the road to the Super Bowl runs through Philadelphia. So if the Eagles win out, they will play every home game. They will play every game at home. If they lose, the next highest seed will host the game in the NFC title game. So we will see what happens in the NFC. The other matchups, New York Giants and the Minnesota Vikings, the 6 versus the 3. It'll be in Minneapolis. That will be on Sunday at 4:30 p.m. or 4:40 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So that covers the NFL for Week 18. We've covered the playoff matchups. Some other news and notes to cover while we were gone. The Minnesota Vikings came back from 33 points down to defeat the Indianapolis Colts. Teams are 1,548-2 now when they lead by 30-plus points. The Bills and the Oilers wildcard game in 93. A week after playing in the regular season finale, the Bills lost 27-3 the week before. They lost Jim Kelly. Frank Reich comes in for the Bills, leads them to a comeback victory over the Oilers. Why do we mention Frank Reich? Because Frank Reich got fired and replaced by Jeff Saturday, who was the head coach of the Colts when they lost to the Vikings. That was also the 1,000th game of the Minnesota Vikings franchise history. They have now played 1,002 since then. Speaking of milestones for franchises, the Denver Broncos got their 500th franchise victory in their win over the LA Chargers this previous weekend. It's also their 300th home win in franchise history. For the Cleveland Browns, Nick Chubb becomes the second Browns running back at the 1,500-yard rushing season. Jim Brown did it 3 times in the 50s and the 60s. For the Kansas City Chiefs, Jerick McKinnon has 9 receiving touchdowns as a running back, the most receiving touchdowns by a running back since Marshall Faulk had 9 for the Greatest Show on Turf Rams in 2001. And finally, the Vegas Raiders, I want to call them the Oakland Raiders, just like I want to call them the San Diego Chargers. Josh Jacobs becomes the first Raider to win the rushing title in the NFL since Marcus Allen in 1985. One other thing we'd like to mention, and I'm sure Colby would love to have you chime in on this as well. NFL Red Zone is potentially losing one of its channels. Scott Hansen and Andrew Siciliano host it. Siciliano does it on DirecTV. Scott Hansen does it on NFL Network. DirecTV is losing the rights to Sunday NFL Ticket to YouTube TV starting next season. Changing from Siciliano to Hansen is like changing political parties. It's 2 different people, 2 different styles, but 2 great channels. You gonna miss Siciliano? I'm definitely going to.
Yeah, I will absolutely miss Siciliano. It feels like you just can't have one without the other. Like giving people the option. I don't know if I compare it to political parties just because that's so different because, I don't know, with Red Zone, I don't know, it's 2 good things and you're getting rid of a good thing in Siciliano.
It's not official, but Scott Hansen alluded to it. He said he had a lot of respect for Siciliano, which kind of leads me to believe that it's going to be discontinued on Sunday NFL Ticket. We'll see. At least on DirecTV, it's discontinued. But Scott Hansen looks to return for season number 15 on NFL Network starting next season. We'll see what Siciliano does. And our last item of business, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the only team in the playoffs this season with a losing record. It's funny because last season, the NFC East champion Cowboys had a losing record, and everybody was giving them flack for it. This year, the Buccaneers are in the playoffs. I haven't really heard about the losing season. So The NFL and its hypocrisy, or at least the media and its hypocrisy.
For now, I'm Chandler.
So let it be written, so let it be done.
Thanks for tuning into the Sport Report today. We'll be back on our next episode with the latest in sports. Right now, we're still working on a website, but if you want to follow us on social media, we are at SR_CWS on Instagram and Twitter. You can also find our podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, you name it. We're on almost every podcast platform.
This podcast is copyrighted by the Sport Report for viewers to understand sports from a news reporting basis. Any other use of this podcast, Sport Report logos, or anything associated with this podcast without the express written consent of Chandler With Sports is strictly prohibited.